Which teams and players are going to flop in the Championship next season? That's going to be the focus of today's video. I asked you guys for some of your suggestions for players or teams who you don't think are going to be living up to the hype next season, and there was a mixed response. Some interesting shouts that you guys have thrown into the mix. We're going to be going through some of the best comments today, and I welcome your thoughts in the comments down below as well. Which player, manager, team do you not think will live up to the hype next season? Still got a long way to go before the start of the campaign, but interesting to get some early shouts. Before we jump in as well, a quick call to action. If you're not already subscribed, make sure to go ahead and do so. This is your best place to stay updated with all the latest news and content from the Championship. But without any further ado, let's jump in. An interesting point here from Jacob Pro. He says Jacob Greaves holds stability in Hull's entire team, and once he goes, they'll slowly fall apart as lone players aren't as passionate about the club and their owners keep bringing in new players with little care about the club apart from the money. Now, Hull are a team who could catch a lot of people off guard next season in either direction. The club have been very ambitious under this new ownership, and it is worth pointing out that season upon season they have been making huge strides forward. In 2021/22 they finished 19th, the following season 15th, and then last season they finished in 7th. But whether or not that finish of 7th place under Liam Rossinio was a topping out point, we'll have to wait and see going into next year, or whether or not they can go that one step further. The point about Jacob Greaves is definitely valid though. He is a defender with lots of Premier League interest right now, and understandably so. He was one of the best defenders in the Championship last season. The club have already said that if a suitable offer does come in for him, they won't stand in his way. I think that's how Championship clubs have to act, really. What Hull will get for Jacob Greaves is a hell of a lot of money, and how that money is then reinvested into the rest of the squad, like I'm sure Hull will be keen to do. You know, they've not shied away from spending money under this ownership. That will be really instrumental in determining how Hull are going to do for next season and what that squad's actually looking like. Obviously, last season, very ambitious in the loan market in particular. Playing the loan market like that does come with its fair share of risk and reward, though. Another shout here for Hull to be the flops of the season, coming in from Stephen. He says, hope I'm wrong, but Tim Walter at Hull, fear the worst, wrong decision to sack Rossinio, and if the crowd turns, he's done. Now, what he will receive, I'm sure, will be plenty of backing from the ownership. It was a bold decision to get rid of Rossinio, but while on the whole I thought Rossinio had got things moving in the right direction for Hull, there definitely were a few red flags that have popped up throughout his tenure in charge of the Tigers. Style of play obviously being a big sticking point for the board there. Tim Walter coming in is an interesting one, obviously coming off the back of 2.5 years in charge of Hamburg, went agonisingly close to promotion to the Bundesliga on a couple of occasions with them, but just never quite happened. I'd be interested to gauge the mood around Hull fans right now. If you had to call which position you're going to finish in for next season, whereabouts are you putting yourselves right now? An interesting one here from HGPS, who thinks Morgan Whittaker could be the flop of this season. He says, a random thought, but if Morgan Whittaker stays, maybe him, because I feel Rooney isn't good enough and he'll want to play at a higher level. Now, Rooney has previously played alongside Whittaker from his time at Derby, and also got a brief chance to manage him as well while he was the head coach at Pride Park. On the back of last season, Whittaker's bound to be a player that will receive plenty of interest. He's at a good age, being just 23, and scored 19 goals and got 8 assists for Plymouth last season. What is worth flagging up though is Whittaker was definitely a lot more prolific in the first half of the season compared to the second half of the season. Under Schumacher, he was absolutely firing on all cylinders, but once Ian Foster came in, his goal scoring record wasn't quite the same. The whole setup of the team and how stylistically they are set up will have a big influence on Whittaker next season if he does stay at Plymouth, and whether or not that team can get the best out of him. Had a little bit of a deeper dive into his numbers, and he actually only scored 4 goals in his last 19 games of the season, so the vast majority of his goals did come in the first half of the season while Schumacher was still the boss. Be interesting to see what Plymouth value him at right now. A big call here from Casey, who thinks Nonto from Leeds could be the flop of the season. I don't see the appeal to him as much as others do. Now, there is every chance that heading into next season under Daniel Farke, Nonto could be the main man in that Leeds United setup. I mean, Leeds are bound to get offers for Nonto, but I'd see him as more likely to stick around next season than someone like a Somerville maybe, where the interest is going to be a lot higher because of the season he's just had. Last season, Gnonto was sort of in and out of that side, wasn't he? Became a lot more prominent in the second half of the season, started 22 championship matches and came off the bench on 17 occasions. In that time, scored 8 goals and 3 assists. I definitely think there are more gears to come from Gnonto because, I mean, off those stats alone, he doesn't look like this all-encompassing star player that a lot of people make him out to be, but when you watch him, especially when he's fully on it, he absolutely can be a game changer at this level. But whether or not he can take his goals and assists to the next level next season, we'll have to wait and see. Now, there were quite a few shouts for Burnley to be the underperformers of next season. This comment from Freddie backing that up. Tough to make a definitive call on Burnley ahead of next season. As of recording, they're still yet to hire a new manager going into next season. Ruud van Nistelrooy, the latest man to be linked with that Burnley hot seat. Despite the way Company sort of left how badly last season went for Burnley in the Premier League, that job is still pretty desirable, I'd say, at least from the outside looking in, for a lot of managers to take on. I think there is still a very good, talented pool of players there. Yes, there will be sales from that squad over these next few weeks. I think that is inevitable. I don't think the 3 coming down from the Premier League this season are anywhere near as strong as the 3 that came down last season per se. But Burnley will be expected to be up and amongst the promotion chase, and anything less than the top 6 finish for Burnley next season would be an underwhelming campaign for them, I'd say. This was an interesting comment. Are my team Watford relegation contenders? We seem to have no money despite the Premier League loss, and Watford are a team that from a distance I am a little bit cautious about at the moment. Obviously a team and football club who have bounced from manager to manager and different philosophies throughout their recent history. They've landed on Tom Cleverley of late. I actually thought that Cleverley showed a decent amount of managerial nous in the back end of last season. Only won 2 of his 9 games in charge, but had a really tough run of fixtures and there were a lot of draws in there for Watford towards the end of the campaign. My concern is Cleverley is a really inexperienced manager and he's gone into one of probably the most chaotic clubs in the Championship in Watford. I think we've already seen enough in Cleverley to suggest that he could go on and become a really good manager, but with the pressures that potentially face Watford next season, especially if they're going to go into the next campaign weaker than previous years because of their financial situation and parachute payments drying out, that's a really tricky scenario to navigate, especially as an inexperienced boss like Cleverley is. Mankind thinks Sheffield United will be the flops of next season, and that was a pretty popular consensus. A lot of people shouting out Sheffield United as the flops of next season. Now with the Blades, it all depends on how smoothly this takeover goes, how quickly the Blades can then start doing some deals ahead of next season, because right now a lot is needed. It almost felt like last time when they were promoted from the Championship, even that squad as it was then probably wasn't geared and ready for the Premier League, and I think that was evident last season. They do have a very experienced boss there in Chris Wilder, but a lot of people have already tipped them to struggle next season. This comment from Austin Walker I thought was a really eye-opening one from a Sunderland perspective. Unfortunately, as a Sunderland supporter, I believe it will be us. This style of ownership is proving to have some massive holes in it, and a couple of other key points there within that comment that he does touch on. The amount of time it's taken Sunderland to land on a new permanent manager does quite rightly bring up a lot of red flags. You wouldn't have thought a club with the stature of Sunderland would have all too many problems in attracting managers there, but they've clearly had issues. It's obviously a very clear philosophy that that club has to recruit incredibly young players, and they don't really tend to break that model. I think they have already seen some real success out of that in the likes of Jack Clark and Jobe Bellingham, for example, but that recruitment strategy is a bit of a double-edged sword, and I thought we probably saw that last season in the Championship with how much they struggled in the back half of the campaign. We've said it a few times on the channel lately, but in the calendar year of 2024, only Rotherham have picked up fewer Championship points than Sunderland have. GX thinks that Sheffield United, Blackburn and Sunderland will all be in the mud next season. Blackburn are an interesting one. I don't think that the expectation levels are especially high at Ewood Park. You could probably argue that they're at an all-time low, actually. But the potential consequences of losing Sammy Smodics and not properly reinvesting enough of that money into the rest of the squad and into the right areas. With how many goals Blackburn conceded last season, I know they tightened things up a little bit under Eustace, but that's definitely a big worry for them going into next season. But guys, there we have it. That will now wrap it up for today's video. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. Get all your thoughts in the comments down below. Plenty going on in the Championship right now, and I'd be interested to know from you, who do you think will be the flop of next season? As always though, thank you very much for tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next one.